Ya pedimos disculpas a todos ustedes que están ya esperando el cafecito, que no les va a tocar todavía, porque van a seguir disfrutando de este interesantísimo panel con la presentación de Judy Baca, pintora, muralista, escultora, académica, profesora de arte en la Universidad de California. Es artista, educadora, activista y pionera de arte comunitario. Fundó el primer programa de muralismo de Los Ángeles en 1974. Sus proyectos recuperan la relación entre la historia, las personas y el espacio, marcando la dignidad de precedentes históricos olvidados, restaurando relaciones con los sectores marginados, estimulando nuevas correspondencias. Nos viene de visita de la Universidad de California, Los Ángeles, y agradecemos mucho su presencia y lo que va a compartir con nosotros el día de hoy.
I'm going to say thank you all for convening such an interesting day for us, and I've enjoyed this panel very much because I think Steve Loza should be our DJ in LA. And it took me through my whole history, including growing up in Pacoima with Richie Valens and Los Lobos and Zoot Suit and so forth, and Malaquias. Long time of kudos for your wonderful work, and Alma, a long wonderful day to the one soldado with my tia, everybody in tow, and the work you've made since. What I want to do today is give you a little bit of a trajectory of the work that I've been doing as a public artist. And it actually spans now nearly 40 years. I'm getting up there too, Malaquias. And I really like to talk about this as sites of public memory. And I think there's a continuing theme that we keep talking about, which has to do with the recovery of our story, the making of an alternate reality that includes us. It makes it possible for us to be seen where we are prevalent in every place and every moment, and yet disappeared in the official story. So when I started to think about this, I started to think, how can I describe this to you? And how can I talk about Chicano art through my own work? And I think what I'm showing you today is Chicana art, a Chicana's version of how to be inclusive and how to make a larger family and how to tell an alternate story. And this is all about work that has been socially engaged. I could describe myself as a political landscape painter. Increasingly, that seems to be the story. This is a clear cut flying over the Northwest Territories in Haida Gwaii, a place named by the Haida people. And at a particular lighted moment, the clear cut turned red like a wound in the land. And I began to really understand that I saw the relationship between the land and the people in all of my work. I've always known the value of art as a tool for transformation, both personal and political. What I've had to learn, though, through my own attention to my own curiosities and artistic focus, is that I tend to tell the stories through the land as a method of recording memories in these paintings and large-scale works that are in public environments. This is a piece for USC. A previous piece is part of a traveling mural called World Wall, which I'll approach again. This is a 30-foot by 15-foot work at USC, and it's about the history of Los Angeles. I have been learning to listen to the land. I think that would be the closest way of describing what I've been doing, and to hear the story hidden there. It is this concept that the land has memory, and that learning to put our ear to the ground to listen and to understand the spirit of that place has been the basis of my public artwork for now 40 years. This sometimes tends to have political implications, as the land is the very site of contentious struggles, and often becomes defined by territories and borders. In all cases, the land is the site where the memory is embedded. I made this little graph trying to explain to people what I thought about how one would excavate a site, how you would begin. It's from this idea that the memory is somehow embedded in place, which teaches across so many cultures, which it reaches across so many cultures, that I derived this mountain as a conceptual model of an excavation of memory in a public artwork. It's a reminder that history does not begin when you arrive. We as humans feel the need to stand where important historical events happen, to understand the event, to feel the story. It's common across many cultures. In Los Angeles, a city of nations, we see it evident daily as we pass through the shifting languages and cultural markers of our city. It begins with the spirit of the place. And that's all life that has passed. If it's a valley, was it formed by a glacier? It begins at the very beginning of the conceptualization of nature. The topography is what you're seeing today, a parking lot, but underneath it, there may be ancestors. Above that, the inherent nature of the site has to do with the way it's formed. The next thing is topography. Then the spirit of the site is all life. All living creatures, all things that have passed through that space. The current enactments might be the parking lot. It might be a place in which the artist is asked to come and to mitigate some kind of bitter pill that public authorities would like to have accepted by the public. We're going to put a shopping mall over this native site, indigenous site of graves, and you're going to help it make nice, right? So what the artist sees is all the way at the top of this mountain. This interest in the land's memory and for telling the stories of the people took me to contested territories in East Los Angeles. This is probably the earliest photograph ever taken of me out in East Los Angeles in about 1970, and the person who looks like Joan Baez with a headband, that would be me. And I'm holding a drawing that has been done by the gang members of White Fence Gang. And we are painting in the front of a series of doors in a park. And before this time, the kids, the young people there, have taken the doors off repeatedly. But no one have asked them, why did you tear the park down every night? And the simple answer was, because there was a basketball court inside, and we don't have one. So it was in that site that I became sort of miraculous, because people saw that somehow painting that place, the Medusa head, made it stay. And of course, it was the beginning of listening to the land and listening to the people. It's taken me to the agricultural fields of Guadalupe, where I spent 2 years working with the farm workers to tell their story. And here I'm with the broccoli pickers. Quite a skill, picking broccoli. It's taken me to the urban gridlock of Los Angeles freeways. Here I'm painting Los Angeles Olympic piece that is now 25 years old and on the Harbor Freeway in downtown Los Angeles. It's taken me around the globe. And this particular site is in El Salvador, in a little town called Ataco, where I'm working on a reconciliation in a post-war country. There I work with over 100 artists to produce the first works on domestic violence against women and the rights of children not to work in the coffee fields. We painted over 300 pieces. Over 1,000 community people came out to support us, lit up the streets, and we worked day and night to produce the works. As a child, I watched as the rivers, the arteries of the land, were turned into concrete. I think I can trace the beginnings of my career as a political landscape painter to growing up alongside the Los Angeles River and watching its transition. Here, our city fathers have determined that the river overflows its banks and it must be tamed. So in 1920, they began the largest public works program in the country. They began to concrete systematically the entire Los Angeles River. It left spaces like this, conduits that were filled with concrete, that divided communities, that created pollution that went too quickly to the sea, that stopped the water from seeping into the aquifer. And as I began to look at this site and was called by the Army Corps of Engineers, because at that point I was becoming known as the mural lady, when I paint the site And I started to see the site as the hardening of the arteries. And I began to dream of tattooing the scar where the river once ran, as a metaphor for healing our city's divisions of race and class, and propose the Great Wall of Los Angeles. This occupation has taken nearly half of my life, or over half of my life, to produce. And it's how the river became my teacher and a classroom in which to teach, and how I came to spend half of my life, or over half of my life, in this concreted channel, painting a new story of American history, one that included my family, included the families of immigrants, and in fact, people who were original people. The work is now 2,740 feet, a half a mile. It's a narrative piece that begins with prehistoric times and goes all the way up to the 1950s. It's a work not completed, begun in 1974, and recently restored. Over 400 young people, at-risk youth, work with me in this process, recovering their own family stories and putting these stories into a public space. And recently, when I was talking about this, someone said to me, "Why that scale?" And I said, because size and scale is power. If you can take up the space with this story, then you're creating a powerful act, a recovery. So in 2011, the work was recognized by the California Cultural Historical Endowment with over $1 million for its reproduction and renovation. So we're very proud of that. It was declared of importance historically, and I led a team of 30 painters to recover the work in its entirety. You see a little bit of this recovery. Replacement of the color loss, a careful restoration was required with all artistic hands submitted to a palette control, to a very sophisticated way of actually recreating the attachment of the paint to the wall. This work now, 40 years old, will last another 40 before it has to be restored again. Before, after. Before, the immigrants working in the fields of California, after. McCarthyism and the Red Scare and the Blacklist, the Hollywood 10, before, after. So we're looking at this. This is the destruction of the oldest Mexican community in Los Angeles, a story that has been little told, where there's no memorial for this story, in which the people of Chavez Ravine were moved out of the oldest part of Los Angeles, Mexican part of Los Angeles, and Dodger Stadium descended into the area. Before, after. The Great Wall is in the process of now advancing with another generation of young people leading. I'll be working with them for the development of the 1960s and 70s, and it will be continuing now with new technological methods in which we will be able to paint on substrates and attach them to the wall. We're using new processes, and I will show you a little bit about that in this piece, which is the Denver International piece. It's a piece called La Memoria de Nuestra Tierra, and it's the story of my family. And I'm certain that the notion of land and memory comes from her. This is Francisca. This is a woman who raised me, my grandmother. And my grandmother was a person whose world had everything in a place. Something was taken from the land, something was returned. She asked plants for permission when she took a cutting to plant them and could make a dried twig grow. Everything had purpose in her world. Even what I thought were weeds growing by a water fountain, she turned into teas and potions and cured all of our neighbors. My grandparents came from Mexico to La Junta, Colorado, during the Mexican Revolution. They followed the course traveled by thousands of other Mexican families from Chihuahua to the United States through the historic northern territories of Mexico, which are Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, via the Ellis Island of the Southwest. This is the piece in the Denver International Port, so if you're waiting in security, you'll be standing in front of this narrative work that's 30 feet long. And my mother was born in La Junta, educated in the Colorado's segregated school system, and raised in its segregated housing in the 1920s and 30s. It's a particularly mean-spirited place. It's a place where Chicanos, Mexicanos, had to sit in the back of the bus, could not go into restaurants, where it would say, signs on the front of the restaurants would say dogs and Mexicans not allowed. And that the simple fact that even in death, the bodies of racially different people were required to remain separate was what moved me to create an artwork that would give dignity to the mestizo story and the stories of countless others who toiled in the mines, fields, and railroads of Colorado. So these are some of the iconic figures that are in this work. It's both painted and digitally generated. It looks like something's happening to the image, isn't it? Let's see. Why is it doing that? The top part of it's cut off. On the left side, you're looking at Chihuahuan miner. This recovery of the story, these images are embedded inside of a painted landscape. You'll see Corky Gonzalez and Cesar Chavez at a moment they're deciding to bring the grape boycott to Colorado. You'll see a Cheyenne woman who survives a massacre on the edge of the Luisa Maria Baca land grant. Let's see if I can, it's moving without me now. You see her there. And then the last image is my grandfather looking out at the camera on the right, a photograph I found from the Colorado Railroad Museum, where he actually ended up working. The purpose of this was not only to tell the forgotten stories of people who, like birds and water, traveled back and forth across the land freely, but also, before there was a line that distinguished which side you were from, but to speak to our shared human conditions as temporary residents of the earth. And as part of this, we did a full recovery of the graveyards in which Mexican graves were allowed to go fallow. This is very common in the South. Black graves allowed to be disappeared. My grandfather's grave was disappeared, as were all of our previous descendants, my great-grandfather, his brothers. And as part of this story, we not only told the story of Ludlow and a giant migrant strike, we embedded Corky Gonzalez and Cesar Chavez as mesas in the landscape. But my family came together and recovered our graves, remarked them, broadcasted on the BBC. Internationally, the governor was forced to maintain the graves in this tiny little place in which the graves were allowed to go fallow. Another story, again, both digital and using the Great Wall process, which now is exemplified and moved across many different types of stories, is a place in Los Angeles where the largest diaspora of people from El Salvador reside, in a place called Pico Union. And the story is a very painful story of people who left their homes in the 1980s, came to Los Angeles with almost 75,000 people having been murdered there. And these are young people putting together the timelines to tell the story, recovering these kinds of photographs from their family, which became the La Memoria Nuestra, the La Memoria Historia archives, which are now reside at the Central American Research and Education Center in downtown LA. These are photographs of a mother and child. These are people who are the last photographs ever taken of them because at that point they were disappeared. So the people being disappeared. These are photographs that were also taken from the community. The drawing on the right is from a woman who survived the El Mesote massacre. And all of these people on the left have been disappeared. So all these stories were images that actually ended up in the mural because the mural was both painted and digitally generated. In other words, the images could be used directly from photographic content and then embedded into the works. And we have been perfecting the creation of the largest prints ever made at the highest resolution on new substrates, which then can be reproduced. And the good news about this for Chicano art is that those works that have been censored and destroyed can be remade. So in other words, if you take my piece down, it can resurrect itself anywhere in the world. So this is part of the piece. You can see this work completed here. This is a 35-foot piece, and it's called The Migration of the Golden People. And it is really the story that rose out of the people, that came from the people of Pico Union. These are my team of students who did all the research with the kids, and its installation. In a sense, it's a kind of Mayan map. It tells you about what happened, and it begins to make the understandable to this new generation of young people being born in the United States why their families left. These stories are contentious, and I'm going to show you some kind of shocking images that are really, really quick about Baldwin Park. And Baldwin Park is a part of the city that is near the mission, the founding mission of the city of Los Angeles. And this mission was the first mission that was built in the series in California that founded Los Angeles. And recently, about 5 years ago, there was, or maybe a little bit longer now, 6 years ago, this ad went up in Los Angeles. And it said, Los Angeles, Mexico. And it was an ad done by a Noticia 62, which is a radio station. And it enraged the anti-immigrant people. It enraged them to the degree that they decided that they would take upon themselves to take it down. So I think I'll see if I can find a picture of that. There it is. They actually climbed the billboard, put an American flag over Mexico, and all over their internet, they began to post these kinds of things, courtesy of unknown patriots. And they created a national alert. As they began to do this, you can see here's another beginning to advertise directly to the Latino population and do it in Spanish. This also enraged them. And my little metro rail station, which was designed 12 years earlier, became a target. It was designed by I designed it for the city of Baldwin Park. And what I did is I used the Mission San Gabriel. What I was fascinated by was that when you looked at the designs of the Mission San Gabriel, it was basically a fortress. And it was a fortress because the founding of that mission was a very destructive one to indigenous people. In fact, the chief's head was decapitated and put on a stake for trying to protect the women from being raped by the Spaniards. So this is an image that became the floor pattern that I was going to do on a 100-foot platform. There's the drawings for that. There were some pretty amazing people in Baldwin Park. It was all people of color. Almost 98% of it are people of color, but one ethnic group after another came to this place. I designed these mission shapes for the places where people sit to meet a train, a 400-foot long platform, and all along that platform I put language of 5 different languages of the indigenous people. And the last one says memory and willpower, which is how you retain your culture. And you sit on metate benches, and your bottom gets branded as the cattle, and the people were branded to associate them with the different missions. Here's also on each site the number of people who were baptized and the number of people who were killed. So it was in a sense, this was a political landscape. And yet, the Minutemen, who began to make death threats of me, and at a certain point, we printed all the death threats, and I had 7 feet of them that were done on the internet. They threatened to take down the piece. They were going to take it down by the 4th of July, and they marched on the work. This is a mission remnant over the plaza, and it goes in 4 directions. And I sandblasted on it a statement by Gloria Ansel-Duell and by people from the community. And it said this land was Indian once, no, it was Mexican once, was Indian always, and will be again. I think I'm saying it right. And that was the thing that made them the craziest. Not because she was a lesbian writer, but because they just didn't want anything to be Indian again or Mexican. They began to say that I was a reconquista and that I should be stopped. And this is it. This is our Save Our State posted this. The land was Mexican once, was Indian always, and will be again. And this was a testimony to why they had to get people out there to take it down. This statement, it was better before they came. I underlined the they, because in this city of immigrants, one wave after another, it was kind of funny. Which they? Which they? Indians, Mexicans, Arkansas people, African Americans, all the people who came to work in this place. So what happened is that lovely people like this came. Save Our State and the anti-immigrant forces marched against the peace. Over 700 people came to protect it. And what they were very effective at doing is trying to bankrupt the city of Baldwin Park. This is the Save Our State people. By virtue of having to protect 40 to 50 people against a population that was rather largely in support of the work and massively supporting it, my little monument ended up being a site where a murder looked like it was going to occur. It was wrapped in yellow tape. It became a very contentious story. And in the end, we were triumphant, but it was a very long journey. They came twice, and in the process, they cost the city over $100,000 to protect them. And how at one point, we created a phalanx of artists between the Save Our State people and my supporters, and the supporters of the monument, and used the notion of using art to be kind of a border between us and to stop the violence, because we were very close to having out-and-out warfare on the street. These are, I think this is Corky Gonzalez, and there's a big puppet made of 3 Chicanos thinkers. And we also created a moving mural. The moving mural was from the internet, things that people said to me on the internet, which were pretty incredible things, like, good art confuses racists. The world is too small for your narrow mind. And as we used these 90 people, it occupied 90 people, so they wouldn't end up beating up the Save Our State people, and we moved the piece in a synchronicity and a performance that made it possible for people to talk back to them. We think you mean save our status, not save our state. The world is too big to fit into your narrow mind. And so people had their sense of, the land does not belong to us, we belong to the land. And then it turned its back. The signs became a mural that actually took every person who came through my studio for a month and put their actual ethnicity, which was quite fascinating. Everybody of totally mixed race. And it says, America turns its back on racist. We won. The mural, the monument is still there. But this is not to say that artwork goes into the public arena and is not something that doesn't become something difficult to maintain. Meantime, in a less contentious issue, we are working on a conventional mural that has been going on at its own speed. This is it in Gorky Park, and each panel is done from a different country about a vision of the future, and it has been traveling around the world now for almost 15 years. Here in Gorky Park, it's had the Russian edition. The babushka is cleaning up the space as we open the opening to 150,000 people who will see the first American exhibition in this space. And the work, The World Wall, A Vision of the Future Without Fear, which is about the moment of change in this particular moment in history in each person's country, was exhibited. This was the edition from Russia at the time of the fall of the Communist Party. And you can see the Russian people being crucified, people making the sign of the cross just to the right of them as they are opening the churches, and the 3 heads peering into the darkness with the blind person leading them. It's called Waiting for the End of the 20th Century. This is my partner, Alexei Begov, who is a Cossack painter. And this is actually a moment in which we had to go back and forth by faxes. There wasn't even an email available at that point. And we are opening here in Gorky Park. This work came here to the Museo del Ciudad, and it premiered. It's the first women's piece in the World Wall. And you can see it here on the ground by Patricia Quijano and Marta Ramirez in a beautiful installation in the historic building. Here's the team as it's going up. In Lincoln Park, this is called Triumph. of the hearts, and it's really about people using their own power to create change, with the single person who is most fugitive or the most in danger in the United States, an African-American man. He stands in the shadow of Gandhi, and he goes up against the winds of war. Balance, which came from Hopis who came to see us, because I said, I don't know what peace looks like. What does it look like? My students said, is it everybody sitting around watching TV? And we decided to try and make a world at balance. And they said, this is easy, Judy. It's about the fact that balance and peace is forever to be attained. It's continual. You have to work at it all the time. We added the Israeli and Palestinian collaboration. Here you see the three men working on their piece, each of them working in their home villages and then bringing a united drawing together, which they couldn't do because the Green Line went down during the war. And so we brought them out to work in a military tank building in Monterey, as I was working on the conversion of Fort Ord. This is them producing this work, which is a piece called Inheritance and Compromise. We're now working on the Canadian work, just completed, painting off the coast of Vancouver in a shed, a trailer shed. And this is all about the notion that the world at this moment, from the Canadians, has a great message. It's called The Inuit Sent the World a Canary. And it's about the notion of the canaries going into the mines. And what they're talking about is global warming and what's happening in a place which is a culture of extraction. So this very beautiful work was created by Tanya and a team. This is Tanya Pierce. She's a Russian immigrant. And she's working with the first woman elected to the Green Party in Vancouver. This is her work on the tar sands pipeline that's part of this. And the final work just completed, not yet shown, and ready to come back to Los Angeles. I'm going to end with this, which is a traditional work of a monument to Cesar Chavez. And this is a Mayan corbelled arch, based on Mayan corbelled arches. It really is a kind of tribute to a man who dedicated his life. Obviously, making a tribute to somebody like Cesar Chavez could not be a bronze statue, could not be a victorious soldier on a horseback, but had to be something that would speak to what he dedicated his life to. So this is an arch with a UFW eagle in it, 5 big-scale mosaics done in a traditional way with almost 200,000 pieces each. These are from my paintings. You can see here, there's the paintings that are on the piece. And all along the outside of the work is the people he supported. He is on the interior. It also includes Dolores Huerta. This is her in front of the Chavez portrait. This is in San Jose. And this is a kind of a great moment in which Dolores Huerta is being made permanent in a 200,000-piece mosaic. And this is her as she's seeing it for the first time. And she says, Judy, how long will it last? And I said, Dolores, I think I can promise nearly forever. So, I guess there's just one more here. This is a piece at the Latino Cultural Center in Dallas. This is the beginning of a work at the entrance of their amphitheater, their performing theater. The plotting of how people move into the space. And this is called Danza De La Tierra, and it's really just about the joy of living. The opposite of dying is dancing. This is a work that actually looks at Chicano leaders and Chicano writers from Texas, and looks at, it's a 10-foot by 30-foot piece, and will be a teaching tool there for knowing the Tejano artists of Texas. So I'll conclude with that.
Muchísimas gracias. Muchísimas gracias a los 4 panelistas que nos han dado una exposición extraordinaria, tanto de la música como de las obras plásticas,